every day our numbers are mounting. We are the antidote to reform. No one at the Green Party gets a salary to match Elon Musk.
Welcome back to my channel. It's me, Hugo Harvey here, and you're about to watch my interview with Green Party CEO Harriet Lamb. I spoke to Harriet a few months ago about all things Green Party, so I hope you enjoy. What's your name, what you do, and where are you from?
So my name's Harriet Lamb. I'm the CEO, the chief exec of the Green Party of England and Wales. And I've lived in all different parts of the country, including London, where we're chatting today, including in Somerset and in Northumberland. So, yeah.
And what are you working as right now?
Well, as the chief exec, people often ask me, actually, what do you do? Because obviously you see the leader of the political parties, Polanski, who's obviously doing such an amazing job. I think we can say taking the political world by storm. And then as the chief exec, you're working behind the scenes with the team who help deliver the green machine that helps deliver success in elections. So we're working on the comms strategy, on the fundraising, on people who work with the local parties, our governance, our digital. So it's sort of all the nuts and bolts that go on behind the scenes of the leaders and the political figureheads, the MPs, the peers.
One of the things I saw about like the sort of job description is delivering on the political strategy. And I guess in your words, what do you see as the political strategy of the Green Party?
Well, I have to say at the minute, it's moving so fast. The whole political, old, dusty dominance of the two parties for pretty much centuries has been thrown over. And on the one hand, clearly we have the huge threat of the rise of reform. Terrifying to look at their rise, frankly. But that's also because people have had nowhere else to go. And they're fed up with the two mainstream parties, and there seems to be no alternative. And now they're suddenly realizing that the Greens can be there as an alternative, as an insurgent party of the left. And we can just see how desperate people are for that by the absolute welcome that we're getting now that the Greens are becoming more and more known. And that's leading to an incredible increase in our membership. I mean, it's just very exciting to see we're now at over 175,000 members. People joining literally every day. Our numbers are mounting. So it's about 100,000 people who've joined just in the past few months. It's absolutely phenomenal to see that rise in people who are looking for that alternative. And the slogan that Zach has been using is that we're seeking to make hope normal again. And actually, that is what people say to us all the time. Oh, thank goodness that you're emerging as this absolute force in the political scene now. You're giving me hope again. I was feeling desperate, and now you're giving me hope. So I think we really touched a nerve among the public who are just feeling desperate about what this Labour government is doing, terrified about the rise of reform on the far right. And now people are increasingly realise that the Greens are there to provide that alternative counterweight. And we are absolutely serious about growing our political base.
There's a lot I'd like to ask you about there. But I think one of the things that I would like to talk about from there is that from a lot of your work through like working as a CEO at Fairtrade and Ashton, and now with the Green Party, you've spoken a lot about the power of the living alternative. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit more about that. What's the importance of the power of the living alternative?
Yeah, well, I've always felt that if you're going to shift politics and create change, you need to be out there campaigning, holding your placards that you can see all around the walls here in our Green Party office. You need your placards that put the spotlight on the injustices, for example, the genocide in Gaza. You need to be shouting against extreme injustice. On the climate crisis, we need to be calling it out. At the same time, you need to prove that the alternative can work. And I think in any strategy about how are you going to create social and environmental change, you need both those things. You need to be calling out the problems with the current system and showing that the alternatives are not just sweet little dreams. They're not just boring policy papers. They're actually things you can make work in reality. And that was really what Fairtrade was trying to do. It was seeking to both say there's incredible injustice in the pitifully low prices we pay for our tea, our cocoa, our coffee, our bananas, all the products that we enjoy that come from farmers and workers in developing countries. That is a deep injustice, and we can prove that the alternative will work. And so Fairtrade was founded really by organized smallholder coffee farmers in Mexico, saying we can't survive on these prices, and teaming up with campaigners in Europe to say, well, what if we put a stamp on the coffee or the tea that said these farmers were paid a fair price? And when we started, everyone said, it'll never work. The public will never pay more. You're naive fools. And it worked. You know, the meteoric rise of Fairtrade at one point just proved again the public were hungry to be able to express, to be able to support farmers and workers growing the food and drink that we all enjoy. And that's why Fairtrade rose so phenomenally. And that the sort of outpouring of support from the public led the brands and the retailers to offer it more and more, and just prove in a little bubble that it could work, to prove in this part of international trade that we could do things differently and put social and environmental change first, not last. And then you want to use that both to keep on growing the trade that is done fairly, and at the same time to use that to influence global trade rules. So somehow that's why I sort of believe you always need both. You also need the positive living alternative that shows what it can be. And I think that's what green councillors are doing up and down the country every day at a council level, showing what it means to have green councillors in power. And that's from that base that we want to build up to a national picture. When
we talk about the living alternative, that has been Zach Polanski's strong message. But one thing I was interested in is that you became CEO prior to his election as a leader during the leadership of Adrian Ramsey and Carla Denier. And they spoke a lot about professionalizing the party. And now Zach might emphasize more diversifying or maybe empowering the party in some way. Have you felt a shift in the Green Party itself in that respect? And do you feel like that's given your mandate a new spurred on in some way?
Well, definitely. It's given it new urgency and I think we would all agree we need to be always doing all those things, unfortunately, all at the same time. But I mean, the phenomenal growth that we've seen means that we absolutely have to build the machine behind the scenes. We need to be able to welcome all these new members. We need to be able to respond to people who get in touch with us and say, I'd like to support you. Can I support you financially? Or I'm an expert in this area or that area. How can I get behind you? And I have to say, it's been an absolute dream. We can't keep up with the people getting in touch now because they want to support us in this journey. So we absolutely need to professionalize. There's just no question. We are a serious alternative and we want to be in power. And to do that, we need to build the party from having much smaller number of staff to where we want to be for the future. We also need, to your point, to diversify, absolutely no question. We absolutely want to make sure that we're representing all parts of the country and that everybody can see themselves in the Green Party. And so we're working really hard about now. For example, actually just last weekend, I was at a residential bringing people together who might be interested in becoming a candidate to be an MP. So we're starting now on that. And that meant we've managed to reach out to people from all different backgrounds, people from different communities, from working class communities, many members of the Black community, saying, actually, everybody, we really want to train people up in order that we can better represent the country. We were the first to say we need to become more diverse as a party. That's absolutely one of our goals. We need to be more professional. We need to be more diverse. And absolutely, we want to empower people in order that they can be part of creating that change we want to see. And I have to say, one of the greatest parts of the party are the young Greens. So we're doing incredibly well with young people. And the Young Greens now have 40,000 members who are under 30 or are students. And they are brilliant at helping train people up, giving people the confidence to say, yeah, okay, I mean, I might be quite young, but I'll stand for a councillor role, or I'd like to go for this position within the party. And so that's a really good example of how they're reaching out, they're helping diversify the party, and they're helping professionalise it all at the same time. And I think those things are absolutely connected, actually. And it's brilliant to see the Young Greens just flying.
And there's like, even as you're talking about it there, the Green Party is becoming a broader coalition and sort of opening up in a lot of ways. And there has been an enormous rise in terms of coverage and a new sense of power. But there is also perhaps risks when growing so quickly. What do you see from inside the party as the risks that the Green Party might face in the next 5 years?
Well, obviously, it's a really difficult time in politics in this country. It is honestly terrifying to see the rise of reform. And the single biggest risk is that we don't take them on and that they continue their rise. That is the single greatest risk we face. And that's why we are absolutely determined to mobilise and to offer people that alternative. There are some people who, of course, are die-hard supporters of reform, but some people are turning to reform because they're desperate and they can't see any other alternative. And actually, the Greens are equally an insurgent. We're outside of the establishment, and we can offer that hope as well. And I think also for people to realise that the Greens are often the people who can take on reform. We are the antidote to reform because we're also from outside the established power in the middle that everyone is giving up on and turning away from in droves, whether it's the Tories, whether it's Labour, and to realise that the Greens can be that counterbalance. So undoubtedly, the biggest risk we face in this country now is the rise of the far right. And it's not just about them getting power, it's also about the rhetoric that they are putting out there that is creating division and giving rise to increased racism and making more and more people feel unsafe walking the streets. I mean, that's horrific. And we are ready as the Greens to take that on. We're practically the only people speaking out in favour of immigration, in favour of ensuring that people can still seek asylum in this country, pointing out how much of our economy depends on people who've come from overseas. And we feel we absolutely have to help also shift the national debate and help people see that there are those alternatives.
But so the rise of reform, in a lot of ways, a lot of the other parties have taken it to maybe suggest that the sort of zeitgeist of like political sentiments has shifted. And so that, maybe people no longer want immigration, for instance. And as you say, you also want to perhaps bring in some of the reform voter base and sort of reabsorb it. So how do you balance sort of being the alternative and drifting away from like the political center, where the political center is moving, bringing in people who might otherwise, who might be voting for reform, while also taking it on and challenging the message?
I think I see what you mean. I mean, absolutely, we're holding true to our values. That's the first point. So I think what Zach has done brilliantly is help people realise that the Green Party, clue is in our name, has in its DNA the caring about the climate, the environment, nature, and we also care about tackling social injustice, and that we can do both those things. And that's partly why people are flocking to us now. They're saying, I didn't realise before that the Greens not only cared about the environment, but also had this wider perspective on how we can improve society and tackle the injustice and the inequality that is driving so much of the division we see in society. So people are coming to us because of our values. And at the same time, I think we can really, and that does appeal to people, some of whom are going to reform because they're feeling, well, who else cares about me? And the fact my cost of living has got worse and worse and worse, and my children don't have any prospects. They're angry. And I think our message can appeal to some of those people as well. it's not that we're changing our message. It's absolutely that it's making sure people have heard that there is another party on the political scene that cares just as much about inequality and the cost of living crisis, and the fact that families are struggling to think, how on earth am I going to feed the kids? How am I going to heat the home? And that we're putting forward the policies that will help address that. Also, I think when you point out to people that reform may not be all it's cracked up to be, that actually the incredibly close links between, for example, Nigel Farage and Trump, people are pretty horrified about that. They're pretty horrified when they find out about the connections with the fossil fuel companies and big businesses who are funding reform, who seem like they're your man on the street friend, but actually behind them, they've got these big business backers. And we know that that's very unpopular with the public when they know about that. So I think we can both, there are some people who will come to the Greens from reform, and there are many people who see that voting Green, that aligns with my policies, and see that we could be the people who will stop the rise of the far right.
So you mentioned the idea of affordability. And I guess a part of that is wealth inequality. And so I wanted to ask you about the role of CEO. I guess CEO in general culture has this idea of, huge pay rise. Like obviously a big headline right now is Elon Musk $1 trillion pay package. And so I was wondering if you had thoughts about the ballooning CEO pay and maybe some of the measures that the Green Party takes to stop huge wealth gaps within its own organization.
It's a great question. The one thing I can reassure you is that no one at the Green Party gets a salary to match Elon Musk. And honestly, that you sort of think that shouldn't be allowed. There absolutely should be the ratios between the lowest and the highest paid. And there's no question that CEO pay in the broad economy has completely, as you said, ballooned out of all control, as if somehow the work of one person is worth so much and they have to get rewards and bonuses, and the work of other people within a company, it can be worth so little. And that gap has just got wider and wider. And that's part of the inequality that the Green Party believes we need the policies to tackle. And that's in particular why we're pushing for wealth taxes, actually. That's one of our big drives, is to say we need to tax wealth in order to redistribute the income, but also to stop inequality, because inequality in and of itself is causing poverty. If, for example, you get paid those ridiculous kind of salaries, you can then buy whole office blocks in London, and that's driving up the house prices in London, and that's making rents way inaffordable. So there's a direct link between extreme high pay and people being pushed into poverty. And of course, having back in every organization, and my next meeting is with the union at the Green Party. We're very pleased to have a union here to discuss the pay plan for next year. So obviously that's something we're always looking about. How do we get the balance right? And obviously you want to attract the brightest and the best to come and work for the Green Party. So that's often a challenge because people can command much higher salaries in other places than we pay. So that's definitely an issue we're wrestling with internally, as well as being very clear on the policies we need to see. And
one thing you say is how wealth inequality can fuel different outcomes socially. And even with regard to left-wing versus right-wing politics gets a huge amount of funding from billionaires. And so I was wondering what you think about how left funding could change.
Historically, the Green Party has been really underfunded. Absolutely. And when you look at the parties we're up against and the millions that are pouring into their bank accounts, and that means they can employ more people, they can pay for more leaflets, they can pay for social media advertising, they can set up GB News. It makes a difference. And the more money you have, it helps you win elections. We are delighted that in the past few months, people have been more and more generous in contributing to the party, both, of course, as people join, we get more income, but also then people giving us donations. We just launched a Christmas crowdfunder, and within under a week, we've reached 220,000 from over 7,000 people. And that's definitely our model. We absolutely want our funding model to be people who give a fiver, give a tenner, give whatever they can. However, we are, of course, also open if there are major donors who do have funds, that they're also willing to say, let me give you 20,000 because I want to see your party succeed. And I know you're up against it financially compared to some of the other parties. So, we need to always have that mix of the grassroots funding as our base, but we also, of course, welcome donations from other people for whom we have a due diligence policy, I can assure you, to make sure how their funds were made.
And so one last thing was about fair trade and the concept of, I guess, ethical consumerism. There's one company in the UK called Clean Sheet, and it's a toilet paper company that seeks to reinvest all its profits into a grassroots system change organization, so left-wing causes. And it's sort of meant to remedy driving profit towards a left-wing change, towards left-wing reforms. And it sort of speaks about maybe replacing ethical consumerism with left spending. And I guess, what did you think from your position in Fairtrade were the limits of consumption that was seeking to be ethical? And do you think there are alternatives to that model that you might be interested in?
Oh, there's room for 100 different alternatives. I mean, honestly, we need to be trying everything we can to change the economic model that is so dominant. I think what I love about Fairtrade and about the Green Party is that both are very driven by the grassroots social movement. It is people across the country coming behind something that can help drive change. Now, Fairtrade, we were having to prove to the companies that the public wanted it and push them to offer the products so the public could prove they would buy them. That was the kind of really early battle. And we were incredibly focused on the fair trade and the fair trade mark. That doesn't mean to say there isn't room for other alternatives. Of course, we should be experimenting in every way. And everything is, I think, helping to open the space to show the alternatives, back to where we started, that the positive living alternatives can work. But you also have to get enough momentum to get cut through. And that's what also Fairtrade did. You had that one mark. Behind that mark would sit people working on tea and coffee and cocoa and sugar and nuts and rice and cotton, so many different products with so many different issues for the farmers and workers, but all united through one mark to get cut through. And I think that's a bit similar with the Green Party. We've been working for decades, building up the base of expertise, and then you get a moment when you get cut through, which we have now. And that's what you have to build behind. And that's what we're seeking to do at the Green Party, as we were at Fairtrade, as all these other alternatives are, all the time looking at how do we challenge the dominant economic model, which it's always given as if it's always put forward as if it's a given. And no, it doesn't have to be like that. Other alternatives can work, and stop only thinking within the narrow confines of one economic system. And we've got to show that there is room for these alternatives that can flourish, and that not only can, we actually have to have them, because we can't go on trashing the planet and driving inequality for people. We've got to show that the positive alternatives can work.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching my interview with Harriet Lamb. If you're interested in more of my content, check out my past interviews with people like Zara Sultana MP or Polanski, or subscribe to see what's to come.